Hey, happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
We'll fix the volume on that one of these days. What is it? Is it loud for everybody else too?
I thought it was just me. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I actually haven't gone back and like watched the stream to see what it sounds like to the rest of the world, but yeah, we'll find out.
we our mystery guest for the day is just shown up too.
There he is.
Hey, we got Doug on.
Well, we actually have a lot of mystery guests. So
we do.
Yeah, no Jordan. Jordan's being dad again, I think, or we think.
Or work or something.
Yeah, and so we brought some homebrew buddies with us.
Yeah. So today's episode. You all right? you do what you need to do, man. We'll get it all figured out.
Well, we're all right.
We decided that like since Learn to Homebrew Day was November 7th this year, so it's always the first Saturday in November, that we would talk about like what it's like to get started brewing and sort of like the title says, get back to basics on like what a basic home brewing like setup looks like, what maybe like your first couple of brews might look like. Maybe talk about like what it was like when we all started brewing and stuff like that, our first beers and stuff. And I don't know, just sort of a small little, maybe like a community building episode. I don't know what to call it, but it sounded like fun.
How much better can you get than a bunch of homebrewers sitting online getting drunk on Monday night?
Talking about how good they are.
Talking about beer. So what are you drinking? Let's do that.
So I do have a bunch of homebrew tonight. My keezer's full up. So I've got a Harvest Ale right now in Skellington that I brewed with my buddy Mike Burns's hops that he grew on the side of his garage this year. And then I won't introduce them as I open them, but I've also got a sour apple cider that I made with really sour yeast.
Yeah.
I've got just a normal hard Perry, basically, that I made with a Houston cider, and then I've got a fest beer.
Right on. So I don't have any homebrew. I've got the same thing: a sour cider made with a Philly sour in the Keezer crashing and a plain Perry crashing. But I had a Keezer accident in my house a couple weeks ago and tore everything down. I don't have anything built back up, so I'm drinking Holmes Soaker, and it's a American lager aged in foeder, and it's fucking fantastic. So, and then I don't even have any of your homebrew to dig into tonight either. So I'll just be working my way through various breweries of things. So, what are you drinking, Doug?
I got a homebrewed cream ale Lutra,
Nice.
and I pulled a bottle of North Coast Old Rasputin.
Oh wow, going big.
Yeah.
So Lutra's that new Quebec yeast that who put that out?
Omega.
Okay. What do you think of it?
I like it. I like it a lot. It's pretty clean. It ferments quick. This is second gen of it. I just pitched another pitch yesterday for my kid. So I mean, it's good. I like it. Did an IPA actually with it too for another friend, and that actually turned out really good.
Okay. Yeah, I still have not used that yet, so that's cool. That's good to know.
What are you drinking, Bill?
I got a German Pilsner that I brewed, and it's like the third iteration of that. Drink a lot of Pilsner in quarantine, so
yeah,
went down nice. The Pilsner, yeah, that's right.
Is that like version 3 of the one that you?
It's version 3, and I still haven't got back. The one I liked the best was the first one, but
that
it's
was
hard
so
to remember. It might be,
yeah.
But we're getting closer. So, and then I do have a Harvest Ale on tap too, but so I'll probably grab one of those.
Nice.
But, I brewed of my Cascade hops from the deck there. So.
Oh, we'll have to do some swaps.
Yeah, we need to. I got 10 gallons of it, so I thought it turned out pretty nice. So.
I need to get shit crashing in carbon so I can start trading. God damn it. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, so this is Mr. E Machine version 2. It's a New England recipe I've been working on. Got some help from Jason and Brian with this batch. I definitely think it's an improvement. It's all E hops for the aromatics and dry hopping, and so this batch had Equinaut, El Dorado, and Ella in it. So yeah, that's what I'm planning to drink tonight.
So you say you got help. You actually got drunk with Brian and I, and Brian came up with this recipe on the fly and wrote it down on the back of a pizza box. Right?
Yeah, it's affectionately known as pizza box, but I feel like that will turn people off.
It's pretty much all Brian just fucking throwing shit down on the pizza box, and us going, yeah.
I don't want people to think it's like a tomato wine that's cheesy or something. Yeah.
No, it's delicious. I've had it for sure. Yeah. So this is gonna be like kind of an unstructured get drunk on stream episode. I have like some basic shit for us to like talk about. I already talked about like what like when Learn How to Homebrew Day was. Have you guys ever like participated in one of those? By the way, like Bell's ran them.
I've been to the Bell's
previous
one.
years. Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I ask because I've never actually been to one, and I don't know. Were they like super useful? Like, how are they structured? Like, what do they do? Like, what does Bell's do?
Bell's set up. They asked a bunch of. Well, I think Klob and Bell's did it.
Okay.
And they got a bunch of people to volunteer, and it worked out pretty well because they had people of all different levels. People that just do extract. You had people that just doing all grain, and then various setups. So it's kind of, I thought the most interesting thing as a new home brewer is to go see the different ways that people brew, because I mean you've been to other people's houses before. You have no idea what they're doing half the time, and you're a home brewer and you're like, all right, following you have basic ideas, but like them hooking different things up and give you ideas, I thought, of how you could adapt your own system and things like that.
It was a bunch of different like home brewers there then brewing. It wasn't just like Bell's like.
Yeah, no, Bell's. I don't. They just provided the water and the electricity, and it was all different homebrew setups.
Okay.
I think they were giving tours that day too to the homebrewers if you wanted to take one.
I was at one once at Bell's, and they had Blickman was there running or brewing on a couple of their different systems. Like they had a Tower of Power going, I think, and something.
Oh, you know what? There might. Yeah, they were out in the beer garden though.
Yeah.
Room for them.
Yep.
There wasn't room for them out in the little the area where they had all the homebrewers though. So
yeah,
it was. See that. You're right.
It was neat to see that equipment run and dream about maybe getting one someday. But yeah, unless you're Brandon, you don't have driver money for that. No, Brandon doesn't. He doesn't. Brandon, you don't have a power tower, right? You have Grainfather and something else. But
he was just telling me that he ran like a 100-foot, like 220 like line into his basement from his garage or something like that.
I know he has 2 separate electrics.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's cool. Yeah. So I guess the Learn How to Homebrew Day has been around. I think last year was its 20th year. It's been around since like 99 or something like that. But and it doesn't sound like anybody's doing it this year. The AHA is not really pushing it this year. They're doing pledges online, kind of like how they did for Big Brew Day this year, where you can, pledge to brew 5 gallons of beer or something like that. Just kind of, so they could like see like how many people are, celebrating the day, I guess. I potentially have something that I want to do for that day, but I don't have it all worked out yet, so we'll see. But
so there you heard it, folks. Everybody show up at Brian's house.
Yeah.
I think we kind of get screwed in Michigan on those two, both that and Big Brew, because they're always like fringe days of where it might not even be very nice,
Yeah.
Really crappy weather potentially.
Well, I know, and especially in Michigan, at least, it starts to get cold right around, beginning of November and stuff like that. So definitely boots and a jacket sort of day.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about like how you guys first started brewing. Like, Doug, like when you first started brewing, like what kind of setup did you have?
My first setup was a 5-gallon extract kit from Bell's. A friend of mine, we were going around all different bars trying all these different beers, and I was like, man, this is like magic. And my buddy's like, well, I used to do it in college on I mean, he's an engineer, and I'm like, this dude's really sharp. I need to learn something. And
Sure.
I watched a ton of YouTube videos. And actually, the video that got me was from Bell's, the tall guy. I think he just left. That was running
David?
the general store. Yeah.
Yeah.
He actually did a video. I think it was at the Kalamazoo Library, and they put it on YouTube. And I watched the whole video from beginning to end. And that morning, I called my wife, and I'm like, I'm going to Bell's, and I'm buying a homebrew kit. I can do this. And that's kind of where it started, man. It's been probably two. We did 2 extract kits, and I was kind of like, this sucks. This is like boring. Like, I need to make this way harder. So, and more complicated. So I bought I had an old 10-gallon Igloo cooler, and, I work in trade, so there's always stainless and parts around. So I started building stuff.
Right on.
What
So
year
go
was that?
back in. Oh yeah, go ahead. What year was
2015. Actually, what really got me to my daughter graduated high school, and that August she was leaving for Grand Valley. So it was kind of like Dad needs something to keep his mind off his daughter being 2.5 hours away. So I was like, I'll be drunk and I'll be doing something. So it's awesome.
Right on. So I was going to, just for those that may not be brewers or may not know, we'll go through. Extract is probably one of the easiest entry-level brewing styles to get into, or brewing techniques. It's basically all you need is pot and a can opener and a bucket, ultimately, right? And I've never done extract myself, but extract you buy either powdered or liquid. Malt extract from the homebrew store. You get a kit, you get it individually. You take it home, you mix it with water, you boil it, you add your hops, cool it off, and put it in a bucket with some yeast, and a week later you got beer.
Sometimes it can be even easier than that. Sometimes they sell the liquid DME with like pre-hopped, so you don't
Pre-hop
even
DME, yeah.
do
You don't have to do
anything with that. Yeah.
So literally, for very, very little, if you have a pot and a bucket, you can get into the hobby. And there's some just because it's all done for you doesn't mean that it's not going to make a good beer, a great beer. I mean, there's award-winning extract beers. Even in our club, there's guys that do extract beers, and there's one medal.
When I was forced to do an extract beer, I will.
Patrick does extract all the time. Drew won a competition a couple years ago with an extract beer.
Right on.
Yeah.
What about you, Bill? How'd you get started?
Kind of a long road. I was in college, and somebody had got me a Mr. Beer kit. Probably my wife. I don't know. It was terrible. I made like 2 really terrible beers. I don't think I followed the directions very well. and anyway, so I gave it up for quite a while. I never really had any good. I just thought, nobody can make good homebrew. I never had anybody homebrew, and one of my buddies started. He was a homebrewer, and I went to a party, and he had brewed this amber ale, and it was actually really, really good. And so I started getting interested, and I told my wife, and he got me. So it's probably a good 7 years later. So she got me into the brew on premise thing they do at Saugatuck, where you go there and basically they brew the original Saugatuck and Saugatuck there. Anyway, they do with the brewer. It's expensive, but they basically walk through the whole process and with one of the brewers step by step. You brew on their little system, which is actually an extract system.
Oh, no way.
Like steam jacketed system. And there's like 4 of them, so there can be like 4 groups brewing at any given time on it.
Huh.
Just in the pub there, it's kind of cool. But anyway, so we did that whole thing and turned out a really nice beer. And then I just started doing a lot of research and bought. I went all grain right off the bat because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go. I want to do what the big boys were doing, at least as close as I could do it, because that's the kind of beer I liked, So anyway, so and then I upgraded from a 5-gallon batch to a 10-gallon batch within 10 months or something. It's a fun hobby, but I told my wife at least it's not old cars or something. It'd be way more.
Yeah.
I could think of a lot more expensive hobbies people have. So.
What about you, Drew?
Well, as you know, Brian, I kind of started on the mead route. A cousin of mine brought over some homemade mead that I thought was really good, and I'm like, wow, dude, you made this? And kind of got a lot of feedback from him, and Growing up, my parents experimented making their own wine. They had some grapes and stuff, and supposedly it wasn't very good, but they had some of the equipment and stuff. So I had like these old 5-gallon carboys and stuff. So I kind of started on the mead route, which equipment wise I think is a lower point of entry if it's something you want to get into. I mean, like I've seen meads made where it's like, somebody just buys like a 1-gallon jug of distilled water and pours some out, pours some honey in, puts some yeast in, throw a balloon on the top as your airlock. I mean, you can do it for, I don't know, what's that, $5?
Yeah, sure.
Like, so, and I've made a mead with bread yeast before. There's Joe's Ancient Orange Mead. I think if you Google that, was one of the very first meads I make just to see if it was something I was into, and very low point of entry if it's something you want to try.
Awesome. So is anybody what, were you muted?
Oh yeah, I was just saying Jome. Yeah.
Jome, that's it. Yep.
What about you, Jason?
Oh, I went all grain. I jumped right into all grain like an idiot. Not an idiot.
I don't think. Yeah.
I mean, if you go back to the very first episode of the show, I'm trying to plug our earlier ones where we interviewed Trevor Klimek. I told that story. But basically, in short form, I went to some classes that Trevor was putting on back at Paw Paw Brewing, and he was basically saying everybody could get into this hobby for $100 for a $100 beer kit, and I ran right down to the Homebrew store with Trevor, and $600 later, walked out of there with all the parts to make basically everything I needed for that beer kit, and a cooler and all the brass to make my own mash tun. Spent the next 2 days dicking around with that, and then brewing my first all grain beer. So all grain, we talked about extract being, open a can, open a bag, mix it in water. All grain is where you actually take the different grains of beer or of malt, barley, whatever it happens to be, grind those up in a mill, and then heat, water mash is called mash in, which we can get into more in detail. But basically, you're soaking that grain, you're making a tea out of it, you're getting the sugar, you're extracting all of that stuff yourself, and then you're boiling it down, adding hops, chilling it, then yeast, and so on and so forth. So quite a bit more steps. It's the traditional way most breweries brew beer. And then I think the only style that we really didn't cover is brew and bag. Brian, did you happen to do brew and bag? Or
I didn't. And I wish Jordan was on, because I think that Jordan started that way.
Really?
I think Jordan, and maybe even my buddy Mike, those are the two that got me into brewing before I got into it. They were doing it for maybe a year before me. I think that the first beer that they ever brewed was a more fermented, I guess. It was a Bell's Homebrew competition, Wart. And then that's a really easy way to get into it, because you're not even doing the brewing at that point. You're basically just like controlling fermentation, hoping you get a good beer out of it. But they got into it after that, and I brewed with Jordan a couple times, and he did brew in a bag those times. And so brew in a bag is basically a method of all grain brewing where generally, and don't quote me on this because I don't brew in a bag. I think you can sparge and stuff too, but you basically mash in with most of, or if not all of your water that you're going to use to boil your wort. And you just have a big enough pot and a big enough bag where all of your grain can sit in there and be nice and loose, and can be kind of stirred around a little bit and not clump up. And then after an hour or so of it mashing at a particular temperature, you can just raise it out, squeeze it, let it all drip into your boil kettle, and continue on with your day. There's no running water through it, although I think you can fly sparge with the brew in a bag method, which is basically just like letting hot water drip through your grain to, rinse additional sugars out and stuff like that. Yeah, I'll let people in chat talk about it because I know
Yeah.
Tim Wicklund mentioned it earlier.
Yep.
He's a brewer and a bagger. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean-
it's kind of. Oh, I was gonna say it. You save money in equipment starting out that way a lot of times.
Right. Because you can
And-
mash in your boil kettle. You don't need an additional mash tun to drain into a boil kettle, right? Yeah.
Right.
You
I
might
mean,
spend a little bit more in grain because of the efficiency loss, but
If you're just breaking into the hobby, I think, for entry level day one person, mash tun is probably where you're going to put more of your money. I mean, depending on if you go with a high end brew kettle, but so by trading out a $8 bag that you're going to throw in your brew kettle, you can save yourself $150 on that mash tun, depending on which way you're going to go with it. So it's definitely a cool tool to use. Really helps with like stuck mashes and makes it easy and makes it easier to get into all grain.
No, it's really cool to like see how like where different people started from. So I started all grain too, because I learned kind of from Jordan, and Jordan did all grain at that point in time, and I was like, I know what I'm doing. I'm a pro because I literally watched him brew 2 times, and then like everybody else, my first beer was absolute trash. Because I mean it's learning, right? But no, I know people that started with extract and all grain, and Drew made meads first, and some people make wine, and yeah, no, it's kind of interesting to see all the hobbies just kind of coalesce somewhere or another.
and
The biggest eye opener for me was actually going to my first Big Brew Day. I don't have a portable kit, so I'm one of the weird ones in the club. I brew on my kitchen stove.
So what is Big Brew Day?
So Big Brew Day, that's AHA Homebrewers holiday happens usually, I think, in May, early May. It always happens whenever the Kalamazoo Marathon is, so it's rare that I can go. But you basically get together your club and everybody brings your rigs out into a central location. We usually do it at one well, and everybody brews the same beer. This year, because of COVID, we actually did it at home, or all of our homes, and we got together on Zoom, and everybody tried to brew the same beer or whatever. It was just brewing a beer.
Yeah.
But being at my first Big Brew and watching how like Jake Downey brewed versus you I think were there or whatever, but just seeing other people in their systems and their rigs and how they do things differently, and how you may recirculate differently or have different grain treatments or different sparging techniques, and seeing David Jones with his erector set sparge arm, amazing. With his little collapsible
scaffolding. Yeah.
It's awesome, and just to see that shit out there and how other people do it really opened my eyes.
Yeah, literally nobody brews the same way. And there might be some more effective methods than others, but there's no wrong way, probably.
There's so many more options now. I mean, when I first got started, now there's always all-in-one systems too, which are basically like piggybacked on the brew in the bag, but they use like a stainless steel, mesh bucket inside of the kettle. And it's just you could spend $100, you could spend $2,000 getting into the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or more, probably.
I didn't even talk about beer earlier, but I was real into partial mash when I started beer. So it's still essentially extract, but you use a portion of grains to kind of get body and color and stuff like that. So
how do you use the grain? What is partial mash?
So you would kind of start heating up your water first, or at least some of your water. Usually you're dealing with a smaller pot a lot of times on your. So I had like a 4-gallon maybe pot or something when I started. So I'd put like 2.5 gallons in there of water, heat it up, and then you have like a big muslin sack of grains that you would use. And usually a lot of times, it would be to add your color, to add some body, maybe you have some flaked oats in there.
Just stuff that normal extract wouldn't have in it, right?
Right,
Basically.
yeah. I mean, if you're trying to make like a blacker than night stout, you're going to have a hard time making that with nothing but extract.
Got it.
So I think when I started out, I was really into making stouts, and you put some nice dark grains in there, and you kind of steep it like a bag of tea, once it's up to temp, and you get some of the sugars out, but a lot of what you're after is color and maybe some tannins and things like that. But
that was actually how I started brewing. I didn't do just the dump some LME and DME. All my kits were the partial mash kits.
Mm-hmm.
They all came with steeping grains, and all your base malt is actually the DME or LME. It's actually going to be fermentable. Everything else was like crystal malts and stuff like that. It worked. I liked the beers we made. I was just kind of bored with just dumping a couple things. But I have to say, I'm an ADD brewer. I mean, you guys talking about brewing a bag. I did brew in a bag. I've done the 3-vessel. I bought a basket. So I've got a brew in a bag. I've got a brew in the basket. And I think I finally figured it out. I've got the Anvil 10.5 gallon system that I really, really like. I like that system a lot. I still keep like my mash tun and stuff. I want to do a really big beer. Those Anvils just aren't built for it.
Yeah. I feel like that too. I've tried everything, or I've tried a lot of different things. I've got the 3-tier or the 3 single tier 3-vessel system out in the garage. I've toyed around with some extract stuff too, but I like the I always go back to my all grain in my kitchen. One, it's comfortable. It's either air conditioned or heated. It's got a nice chair, cleans up easy. When I remodeled my kitchen, I added plumbing underneath the sink so I could hook up my chiller and get water quick. But I like the creativity. I like the hands-on nature of all grain, of milling the grains, picking the grains out, mixing that stuff in, mashing in, all of that stuff. I just like that process.
You've always talked about you like eating the individual ingredients and stuff like that. So I can totally see that from you.
I got into it because it's ultimately I like science. I like cooking, and then that's beer. I mean, in a nutshell, it's cooking and it's chemistry, and I like the creativity of it. I like tasting the grains and learning what the different grains and different hops do to give the body, the mouthfeel, the flavor, the color, all of that shit. It's just really crazy. So I do it for the science, of course, not the alcohol at all.
What was your first scientifically brewed beer then?
My very first one.
Sure. Yeah.
So I did. I figure out what to drink next. I'm gonna drink the sour. My very first beer that I picked out with Trevor was a what I thought of as a red IPA. I call it Judgment. I wanted a more amber colored IPA because I like the slightly maltier side of IPAs. I liked the citrusy. I'm not a big piney guy, so I went with Citra and Chinook to kind of give me that citrus bitter. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Your first beer sucking and shit.
I was just gonna ask you.
I'm just being an asshole. I brewed that first beer though. I wish I had I have all my notebooks. I'm a big notebook guy. And that first beer I brewed, I took 19 pages of notes. Everything I did throughout the day. If I had to add a half a cup of water, I think at one point because I thought the temperature I was trying to hit, like 152 right on the fucking nose. So I'm like sitting there with hot and cold water, doing it. And I kept track of the ounces, that I put in it. And I think I even took a temperature, humidity, and weather reading. And I tracked it all. That's how I was into it. 19 pages of notes. Wow. Today's brews, and I don't even have my current brew book on my desk, but today's brews get about a quarter page notes. of what I did. And it was basically just like times I wrote down, and any, if I tweaked the recipe at all. And yeah, it's definitely changed. I've scaled back my my craziness a little bit.
What were you guys' first beers? Like Drew? Did you say that? I know you talked about your
No,
medium first,
I'm pretty sure it was a kit. And funny enough, it's the right time of season. I think it was like a pumpkin stout or something, or a pumpkin beer, like something Charlie Brown. It was a kit from like Adventures and Homebrewing or something. I'm sure they still sell it, but and like I mean, it definitely wasn't a drain pour. It was, I like to think it wouldn't hold up to my current beers I make, but I was happy to drink it. It seemed like people stomached it at least, but yeah, I think it was some kind of pumpkin stout.
Did you say what that kit was, Doug, that you got for your first beer?
I was trying to remember. I think it was like a brewer's best like amber.
Oh, okay.
The kit was a brewer's best like American amber or something like that. It wasn't bad. It wasn't a drain pour. It just wasn't super great. I actually still have a bottle of the first all grain kit. I did a Scottish Wee Heavy 7%. I still have a bottle from that was probably December of 2015. It's sitting in my fridge. That's gonna be my 10-year brew anniversary beer.
Oh, dang, that's awesome.
Watch that shoot through the roof when I open it.
Hell yeah.
Put it outside.
We'll get the bottle conditioning.
Yeah.
I don't know. So like the first one, like the Mr. Beer one, it was like a pale ale or something. It was
sure.
I don't even remember. That was long. Then at Saugatuck, we did. You got to kind of design your own recipe to some degree, and I did a grapefruit IPA. I wanted to do like a big grapefruit double IPA because I never had a grapefruit IPA at the time, and they thought I was nuts. And brought in I brought in a bunch of grapefruits because they're like, "Can you bring the grapefruit? We don't have any of that." So I brought it in and started peeling, put the rind in it, and all kinds.
Oh my god!
And anyway, it turned out pretty good. And then on my own, I just jumped in because I'm a lunatic. I jumped in and brewed it was like a KBS clone. It was like the first beer I ever brewed on my own, and it was way low ABV, but it turned out it was more like a breakfast stout clone. It's probably really what it came out to be, but. I even looked up later at bourbon. I just kind of went. I did a lot of research before I even jumped off on my own brewing. But yeah, that was my very first beer, and it turned out really good. So I'm at an all grain level anyway. So,
do you think that that was a good way to start? Again, it's interesting how some people start with the easier sort of things, and some people just kind of go all grain and go all in. I guess there's two ways of thinking. Some people are big advocates for people starting out easy and learning the basics, and slowly easing your way into advanced brewing techniques and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then there are some people that are diehard trial by fire. You get in there and you do your thing and you learn your lessons. And you will get better because you've already invested, your money in this equipment, and you're not going to let yourself, fail. And what do you guys think? You have a.
I think we all do. I mean, I've definitely added things. Even though I jumped all grain, I still added things to, most recent thing was adjusting water and pH and stuff like that I really wasn't doing. I didn't do that for 6-7 years of brewing. I didn't really mess with it. But it still turned out. And do I make better beer? Maybe. I mean, I don't know if it's
sure.
Much. So just adding little things once you get other things.
So what was that, Bill? You're doing water treatments and stuff and building water?
Yeah. So I usually use RO water now. Once I moved to Kalamazoo, I noticed there was a difference. At least I thought there was a perceivable difference between the water here than the water I was using at Battle Creek when I was just using tap water. And not to say maybe I was just more used to that water at the time, but I thought it tasted different. So that's when I started buying RO and then looking into adding my own salts back in, to kind of create the water I wanted to use or thought I wanted to use.
You wouldn't think. I mean, you should think that water's like that important, but I guess it's not something that I certainly consider when I first started brewing.
Yeah.
I specifically remember quite a few of my beers that I brewed with water right out of a hose. And if you drink hose water, right? And it's like, I mean, it tastes like hose water is a very specific flavor, but like that carries through into the beer then too. Yeah. And like you don't think about that, but like it's crazy.
But to
and
clarify there though, that 20-year-old garden hose that you've got out back's probably fine. But good Lord, brand new garden hose, the rubber.
Yeah,
that's
probably fair.
You can smell it when you unroll it. Ugh.
I know.
When you run the hose like the first time and you get that like kind of creamy haze that doesn't even look like water coming out the end. That's what you want to put in your beer right there.
Yeah.
I do. Like Jason.
I do the water.
Go ahead, Doug.
That's all right. I do the water treatments too with RO, then put minerals back in because where I live, my water table is so bad. It's just, you talk about the off color when you leave the hose. I turn the hose on, it looks like rust water. I gotta let that run for a few minutes. It's bad. I actually sent it to Ward Labs, and I think somebody looked at it from Collab, and they're like, "Do you like stouts?" And I'm like, "They're all right." And they're like, "You ain't brewing anything else with this."
Yep.
So I just RO water, man. I take it over to Gordon's, get a few jugs full.
Yeah, it's a pretty cheap thing.
It makes a huge difference. I'm in the same boat where my water's very hard and too much iron, and
Now you can just go to Brian's and get RO water, right? I hear you.
I do have a RO system. Yeah, I'll fill 5-gallon jugs at a time and just store them until I use them. Yeah.
See, I'm with Gary there. I use my well water right from the tap. I've said this on air many times. When I move my beer, my brewing is going to go down the drain, man, because I brew the beer. The beer that I brew is as good as it is, I think, because of my water.
That's fair.
100%. It matters like what your well water's like or whatever. I mean, a lot of European breweries have done very little, modifications to their well water for hundreds of years. Just depends on what you have,
No, you're right.
available.
And a lot of those European breweries, I mean, not so much nowadays, I think, because everybody is doing everything. But back in the day, you were in a certain region at a certain brewery, they brewed a certain beer, and that was what they brewed because that was what, and that water profile is kind of fit into that style.
They adapted to what they had,
right?
That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta stick with if your water tastes good coming out the tap, if you can drink it, it's probably pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring you some of mine if you want to try it. We don't even drink it out of the tap here. It's just bad.
Came back from the lab.
See, when we moved in here, this house had a water softener and an RO system. And I tried the water without, and I loved it. And it took me about a year, but I finally ripped out the RO system, bypassed the water softener, and we've been on straight well for years. Had it tested out, damn near perfect for brewing. It's like an artesian well, I think. It's flooding. It flooded my basement too, and it's flooded half the damn neighborhood. So, it's a bitch in and of itself. But living here, it's great. The water's beautiful.
Did you keep any of your basement water to brew with? Could have been like a
extra gypsum.
Yeah.
like the roof water from Borges when you worked there.
Oh, yeah, that was good. Yeah, we had a leak in the hospital I used to work at, and they collected in a nice big old rain barrel in the middle of our office.
Yeah, like a big, steel oil drum. I was like, we should brew some beer with that stuff, dude. You never know.
You go back to, if anybody's watched, I think it's on Netflix called How Beer Saved the World.
I still haven't watched that.
Okay. So I believe, and I might be wrong, but I believe in there they actually do an experiment where they go to a duck pond and they pull out water and brew a batch of beer with this, still stagnant pond water, and it's perfectly fine. They were trying to show how beer, the act of brewing the beer with the water and going through the grains and such, actually purifies and pasteurizes. They were doing this before we knew what pasteurization was, before you knew that there were, brain-eating anemones in that pond water or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Amoebas. I'm sorry, I'm a saltwater guy.
Brain-eating amoebas.
Amoebas.
Demo.
But I don't know if that. I don't think brewing takes out, lead and whatever else is coming in off of that roof water.
Yeah.
He did that with he just went out to a lake by his house and got a bucket of lake water and proved that he could brew a good beer out of it, because somebody bet him he couldn't brew a beer out of lake water. It was,
Yeah.
it was like a good pale ale, actually. So,
Honestly, every summer there's a little town by me, Burr Oak, and they have like a heritage day. For the past 2 years, my little homebrew club where I'm at, we go and we do a homebrew demonstration. So we pay for some power and water, and everybody brings their system. I got 3 different guys that brew 3 different ways. And last year, one of my guys, he actually finished his beer pretty quick, his brew day. We didn't have any like decent water, and he's just like, I'm taking this 5-gallon bucket down, and he went down to the river near the grounds we were at, and he brewed another beer with that river water. It was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, for the most part, I guess if it gets boiled, like, it's probably fine, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what you're looking at when especially when you're doing all grain. You're effectively filtering out the particulate matter through that grain bed.
Mm-hmm.
The grain bed acts as an amazing filter there. So you're getting solids out, and then you're boiling the hell out of it. So you're killing any particular nasty that may be in the any Giardia or whatever it's called in the river water.
Nice.
Any of the
I mean,
bugs.
you look at the boil water advisories,
Yep.
and they're like 20 minutes or something. So when you make a beer, it's usually 60. So you're like going above and beyond as far as that goes. And you wonder why, medieval times people are like, well, if I drink river water, I get sick, but if I drink 2-3% beer, I'm fine all day,
Yeah. It's a great documentary if you've got time to watch it, how beer saved the world. And they go back and it's just that,
Yeah.
it was a sanitary drink. It was a nutritious drink. Beer has, the calories in it that the workers used to need to survive. It's basically drinking bread. And,
That's
really cool.
Professor Brian's homework. You go watch that, because Jason's right. It's awesome.
I will. All right. I'll pull it up right now.
I lost my Professor Brian's.
Yeah, what happened?
Good. I hope they all got deleted. It's not very Professor Brian-y today. It's all beginner, right?
I mean, I can make another one really quick, but
I think they're all up there somewhere. The more you know.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So we went over kind of how we started brewing, what our first beers were, and Bill, you kind of got into it with doing water profile, from when you started to what you did now. But I would take that to the others. Like, what is that thing that you've learned or done, or what is that thing that you do now that has made your beer better than from when you started? Like, how do you evolved your brewing?
Fermentation control.
Really?
Temperature control. I think that was huge for me. I mean, the water profile stuff, that really helped. But, when I started actually paying attention to my fermentation temps and keeping an eye on that really kind of elevated, I think, my beer, just instead of just letting it go, paying attention. I fermented a beer next to my Keezer, and I realized how much heat was coming off the back of my Keezer.
Oh yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, man, look at that yeast go. It sounds like a Gatling gun, and it's just bubbling away. I'm like, yeah. I taste it, and I'm like, no, this isn't good.
So why is heat bad? Why is so much heat bad?
Yeast doesn't like it.
Yeah. Or maybe the issue is that yeast does like it too much.
Or, yes, that is correct. Yeah, it liked it too much, so it made them work harder than they wanted to, and they produced really horrible flavors. And that beer got turned into a beer competition, and I was mortally humiliated when they took a drink of it. I was like, "Oh shit, that's my beer."
Did you get some good feedback on that?
I actually did. I got a lot of really good feedback, and they were pretty cool about it. They weren't just like, "You're an idiot, don't." No, they asked me my process, and I even was like, "Check out this video. It was fermenting really great." And they're like,
"Oh, that's so cool."
Oh,
yeah.
man.
No, that's not right. That's not good. And that was kind of one of the biggest things. I ended up buying an old stand-up freezer and an Inkbird temperature controller, and from then on, this thing's a lot cleaner, tastes a lot better.
I don't know if it's something I read or if it's something that somebody told me at one point in time. But in terms of like, heat and stuff like that, I've had it explained to me or read or whatever, that fermentation is sort of like a race. Like the gravity that the yeast is going to get to, it's going to get there regardless. Like there's a starting point and ending point for the most part. But if the yeast is like warmer and it's working hotter, just like when like you're running a race, like a marathon or something like that, like what happens like when you get to the end, like if you were to run like a marathon in 4 hours versus like walking it and getting there like 12 hours later, you're going to be tired, you're going to be sweaty, and like that's how the yeast feel, and that sweat like is what gets into your beer, and adds all those like nasty flavors and stuff like that. And keeping that temperature down, keeps the yeast sweat out of the beer basically. And the yeast gets to where it needs to be when it needs to be there, without like all like the off flavors and stuff like that. And I that whenever somebody says like fermenting too hot, that's always what I think about is yeast sweat. Like,
that's a great analogy. I like it.
Yeah,
makes sense.
It's funny, but that's like the one thing I would say out of all the brewing techniques that's I don't do. I don't do temperature control. I mean,
you have a really cool basement though.
My basement, it's funny because I think Gary again mentioned that having that Michigan basement. I don't have a Michigan basement. But I'm one of the. I'm a big guy, and I don't let my house in the summer. I don't let my house go above 68, and in the winter, I don't let it go, below 68. So I keep my whole house. I love my air conditioning. When my wife shows me the electric bill and shows me the crazy summer AC usage, I just shrug. That's what I make money for. Pay for air conditioning. So I mean, my whole house is kind of like a fermentation control, but it is something that I really want to get into specifically because I know certain strains of yeast, you get into the saisons or the hefes and stuff like that, and fermenting them warmer can bring out different esters, and I know that I can dial in some of my techniques and get different flavors or cleaner beers or even lagering by doing temperature control. So that's great that's your big takeaway. What about you, Drew? What's your big lesson learned?
I mean, honestly, I think that's one of the best ones is fermentation control. But I would say to somebody new, there's a lot of yeast that can kind of get around that factor if you don't want to invest money in doing something like that. I mean, like fake yeast and stuff, which didn't exist when I started home brewing. Like that stuff can pretty much get as hot as it wants, and you'll still make a pretty decent beer. But I think water was a big thing for me, and I think Brian kind of called attention to it, helping me out. Trying to get some good. You basically got to hold him down and be like, "Give me some bad feedback, damn it! I want to know what's wrong with my beer." One of those moments, and he's like, like I think maybe something with your water. Like I have good stout water, like Doug was saying. Like, there's some iron and some undesirables in there that I think kind of held me back. And then I would say like a proper yeast pitch is one of the biggest things I've taken away. Like if you go buy an old pack of liquid yeast or something, you really should be doing a starter. You really should be building that up. Damn near you can't over yeast a beer, to my knowledge.
It's
And
hard.
yeah, it's hard to do. So it's all about keeping the yeast happy at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I always liken it to like baking. You know, like when you put something in the oven, it's got to be perfect when you put it in. Kind of like when you're saying you like cooking, and
Yep.
you know, I would say like it's not like cooking where you can taste it along the way and say, "Oh, I can just add a little more," you know, hot sauce or whatever. It's more like like you have to make sure everything's pretty much correct when it goes into that fermenter. It's equivalent to the oven, and like he said, yeast makes beer. We just make work. So
right.
Very true. Yeah, I think that was the first like big improvement I made when I got into homebrewer. I think, or the first adjustment I made was making my own stir plate and doing yeast starters, and it was pretty quick after I started. So yeah, yeast starter, I totally agree.
I think back in like maybe 2000. So Doug, you started in 2015. I think that I started around then too, because I think my first Bell's Homebrew competition glass is from 2015. But before then, I was mostly making just like I was following recipes and stuff like that. But like, what really drove me to improve my process is I started reading about New England IPAs. Back before M43 was around here or Old Nation was popular or anything like that, and yeah, I just and Shayna will like tell you, I guess, like I bought like a freezer and hauled it downstairs into our townhouse and invested in like a couple new like pieces of gear and stuff just to like brew this one particular style that I had never even tasted before. I just read about online because New England's there wasn't a single New England IPA being made in Michigan at the time, and it was crazy. I think if anything, that's probably what set me off on my like obsession for quality and temp control and yeast pitch and all those other good things. And I'm glad that Drew brought up collect yeast too. Like I think that is a great tip. There's some strains of and Doug, you were using Lutra.
Yep.
There's some strains of Norwegian yeast that are just becoming available. Omega's had a couple for a couple of years now, but these things perform arguably better at warmer temperatures, and certainly don't produce bad flavors. And I think they're just super, super good for homebrewers. They're liquid yeast, which can be a little bit more, I don't know, fickle than dry yeast. Doesn't necessarily keep as long or as well, but some manufacturers are actually producing dry kvike yeast now.
Lalamond has one.
Lalamond has one? Okay, yeah. I think they have dried Voss, maybe? I don't actually know. I
can't remember which one it is, but yeah.
I can't remember either. Yeah.
Well, Brian, you stepped up a bunch from like random packets from Norway or whatever, right?
Yeah, no, well, yeah, I literally on a yeast trading group on Facebook, I had a guy from Norway send me like 6 different strains, I think, back when it was just becoming popular, when like Lars blog was becoming recognized and stuff like that. And
he sent you like dirty napkins with yeast on them or something.
Yeah, I honestly like the stuff that comes from the yeast manufacturers more than what I got from Norway. not the stuff I got from Norway. I don't think it's contaminated. I just think it's more au naturel.
Yeah.
Whereas the stuff is very isolated that I've been getting from the yeast manufacturers, and it's more consistent, I guess. But yeah,
you're not digging that barn hay flavor.
What's that?
So you're not digging that barn hay flavor?
I do in certain things, just not when I'm trying to brew like a juicy New England IPA, and like I get like horse penis in it too, or something like that. Like,
I have no idea what that tastes like.
Somebody did the research, I guess.
Wow.
I was on horse blanket, but I guess.
Hint of horse.
Well, yeah.
No, I think that's a good tip. I don't Yeah, peanuts. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's a really forgiving yeast too. I mean, with the temperature range that it has, that's kind of nice. Give it yeast.
Yeah.
It
The
is.
takeaway is it's a good starter yeast for a home brewer that probably wasn't available to all of us when we started.
And not that I'm trying to like fanboy Imperial yeast or anything like that, but so Imperial has at least one, if not two, Kvike blends, Kviking for sure, but their yeast counts in their packets are like 1.5 to 2 times more than like a lot of other people. And somebody mentioned like yeast health and pitch rates. When you buy like a pack of yeast that has supposedly 100 billion cells in the pack, by the time you get it home, it's probably like 60 billion or less, just because it's been sitting on the shelf for a bit. With the Imperial yeast, you can at least assume it's probably like 120 billion or something, if not more. And that's just at a minimum. Still like super pitchable at that rate. At a and Kvike too. You don't, actually need a lot of it. It doesn't necessarily require as much as like normal yeast. You can go really light on it and produce like super fun flavors when you underpitch it a little bit and stuff too. So yeah, Doug, super forgiving.
It surprises me they put 200 billion in those packs too. You'd think for that one they could probably put less in there and still charge the same amount.
Yeah,
probably
that's something I haven't experimented enough with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I still do normal pitches with my Kvike. Like this beer here, I did a starter for because it was kind of an older pack of yeast, and I mean, there's no harm in building up the yeast profile. I'm not a fan of underpitching like intentionally. If I have time to do it right.
I'm 100% with you.
I also feel that if you have the ability to do oxygen instead of just aeration, you can get away with maybe not as big of a yeast pitch or whatever if you really pre-oxygenate your wort. So, and it's actually something that is a tool for a home brewer that you can get into relatively cheaply. I mean, you can buy little O2 tanks at Home Depot or Menards for $9, and you get the little adapter and an air stone for like $20, and you can easily get 4 or 5 brews out of that. So it's important after you make your wort, you've boiled it, you've boiled out all the oxygen. I'm kind of going back to explain a little bit. And then you chill your wort before you pitch your yeast. Typically, homebrewers aerate by either sloshing, stirring, dumping from bucket to bucket, whatever. I was always worried that I could introduce weird shit because I've got cats and dogs and stuff running around my house. So the alternative is you can get an air stone and pump an aquarium pump, and you can just pump air into it, or you can buy a little O2 tank and pump oxygen into it. So that the yeast has, the oxygen they need to get going and kickstart. And so I feel like even doing a straight pitch, like those Omega or Imperial packages where I'm just taking those and dumping them straight in without making a starter. If I've oxygenated, I've never had a problem.
That might be a good segue. What's the latest thing you've added to your homebrew setup? Because for me, it is an oxygen tank and an aeration stone. Nice. I finally bought the stuff to do that. 'Cause I was doing the whip with the, power drill and some of the other things to aerate, but I'm just curious. How about you guys?
I'd say my.
So I did I had an old keg that I had sitting there for quite a while, and so I bought a adapter to use that as a fermenter. So I usually do 10-gallon batches, so I can just ferment all 10.5 barrel keg, and it's got a little thermowell in it. It's got a blow-off tube, and then it's actually got a dip tube that runs down when you want to drain it, so you don't ever have to even move it. I fill it in the keezer, in the fermentation chambers. I don't have to pick it up and put it in there full of beer, and then I drain it out using CO2, so it's all sealed off. So that's the other big thing is I don't introduce any oxygen when I transfer anymore. I try to do close transferring, which I think that's made a difference, especially in hoppy styles. So, yeah.
On that real quick before we go to Doug is I feel like one of the best things that you can do. We just talked about what everybody, the big thing that they learned. Uh, you know, I feel like it's CO2 purging for me, and I think the importance of CO2 purging, which you can get into again very cheaply. You don't even need a CO2 tank. You can get little, airsoft charged things in a little like a dispenser at the homebrew store. But if you ever have to rack into a secondary or go into your bottling bucket or whatever, anything that you can purge to get the oxygen out of that, I think is one of the best things I learned to improve my beer and avoid oxidation. So there's oxygen in the beginning. It's great. Yeast love it. Oxygen after the fact, after the yeast is done, not good. So what's the big thing that you did though, Doug? You were about to say.
Kind of the same thing what Bill was saying was when I bought my all-in-one system, I also picked up one of those stainless steel fermenting buckets, and that's just awesome. So easy to clean. It's got a spigot on the bottom of it. I purge my kegs too. Like hook it to the liquid end and just fill right from it in there. I'll put a little purge on the top of the fermenter just to keep a little bit of CO2 up there. But that's I love that thing. I actually just ordered another one, so I have to get rid of all these glass carboys and plastic ones.
I've been a big glass carboy guy. Like I never really. I think I only fermented a couple of beers in buckets when I first started, and then I went to glass carboys. And I did all my primary even in glass.
Wow.
But the thing for me recently was, and I know Brian just stepped away, but over at his house and seeing his Speedles, basically he was using big plastic barrel Speedles. So the same thing as a big stainless steel vessel that you can do it. I got a couple of those and I'm loving them. I've got a mead going in one right now and a black IPA and another one, and so much easier. And yeah, the transfer is easier.
Yeah. I have one of those. Those are great. Those Speedles are awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to get into like the stainless steel fermenters, but maybe someday soon. But yeah. Fusion
I have
Speedle,
one Spike Flex. It's like a 7.5 gallon. But
I didn't go that fancy. I got the Anvil.
Oh,
those
okay.
are a lot cheaper. Cheaper. Way cheaper.
It's very beer style dependent. Like I try and leave my flex free for like an IPA or something, like a New England IPA or something where oxygenation's a real issue. And then, I mean, I still do a lot of stuff in buckets, however many years in, 5-6 years in. So
I think I was talking to Brian about it the other day, or maybe my wife asked me and he was here. I don't remember, but I think early on I switched to glass carboys just because I wanted to see it better.
Mm-hmm.
I hated it open in the bucket, and I got lucky. I think early on in my brewing, I think I went over to, it might have been Trevor that gave me a bunch of carboys. I think I've given them away since then. But I just had all these carboys, and it was like, why don't I just ferment right in there? And so I until it's funny, I've got the 2 ciders that Brian helped me get when I was out of town a couple weeks ago are both in buckets, and those are like the first things I've fermented in buckets in probably 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I pretty much just do meads in buckets these days, but most of my meads have a lot of fruit, and like the big round opening is it's perfect for that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm doing it in the Speedle now. It's because I can still fit the potato masher in there to knock my cap down, and yeah. So,
Gary asked a question too. Have you tried to do like a yeast with honey in the water? And I haven't. I had this thought previously too when I had like extra honey and stuff, and I don't know how like on base this is. Supposedly, yeast as it reproduces and stuff like that, it evolves, and there's different generations of yeast and stuff like that. And I guess the theory is that if you I don't know, train a yeast or grow a yeast with a particular sort of sugar, like honey, then it will become more used to eating that honey instead of like what it was grown by the lab to eat, which is mostly maltose. So I have it and I don't, because you need probably more yeast nutrient to do that,
Right.
instead of like malt extract, and you're potentially, and again I don't know if this is true or not, but you're potentially teaching the yeast to eat like a different kind of sugar, and you may have like a lower attenuation at the end.
My concern there
And
would
it's more
just be-
expensive, I think, probably.
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, especially if you compare the price of honey to the price of a 1 pound pack of LME or DME or whatever. That you can
Gary,
use
I
for
think,
a
has some
starter.
hive, but
Oh,
yeah.
but still, my concern there would be the nutrients. The honey itself doesn't have the right nutrients that the yeast really need to be healthy and successful. He also asked me about my carboys, and I absolutely do. So clear glass and light is not good. So here's my lesson learned. I used to store all of my carboys in a bathroom in my basement that we didn't use. It wasn't used as a bathroom. Nobody used it. So it's a small room. The temperature was relatively stable in there. And then if one of them blew off, I had a small area, or I'd even do it in the shower. That was easy to clean. Until I did a raspberry beer and it blew up and it hit the ceiling and the walls, and I wound up, cleaning the room with a paint scraper and repainting the bathroom. And my wife said we're never putting a beer in there again. Lesson learned. So now what I do is I actually have some big buckets, the big blue like Rubbermaid drink buckets that you would see at like a party. And I set the carboy in that. I put my beer in the carboy. I've got my airlock on the carboy, and then I take just black plastic and I either lay it over a black plastic bag and put it over the carboy. And what's happened now is I call them my beer condoms, because if I do have a blow off that's excited or energetic and it goes everywhere, it's contained in this plastic bag inside this bucket. But I can easily go up and take the plastic off, see how the beer is doing. I can hear it through there. I can take my sample really quick. And
Just like a real condom.
Just like the real condom.
I'm just like, he must have like wrote that down and practiced that, because that was like the perfect innuendo from start to finish.
That is
Just
really good.
from the heart,
Yeah.
man. It's how
No
I
pun
feel.
intended.
So if you're going to use carboys for your fermentation, use a carboy condom.
Yeah, some people use
Right on.
T-shirts that doesn't contain the excitement. It just
You can,
just
unlike
light.
real condoms, Brandon. Yes, you absolutely can reuse your carboy condom.
So when do we get banned from Facebook? Is that something we have to worry
I
about?
think it's got to go a lot worse than this, man.
Okay. All
Although
right.
Brian's beer or horse penis is probably
Ooh, yeah.
treading the line.
Yep.
So what else have we touched on? And I guess just to point that out for people, if somebody new stumbles on this video, these are all just basics. Go out and do the research. Reach out to your local homebrew club. Google what we're talking about. This hobby is so approachable and easy to get into, and its payoffs are amazing. I mean, you get to make something that gets you drunk.
It's more approachable than ever, too. I mean,
Yeah,
Homebrew
you know,
stores are everywhere.
I feel like every 5 years it hits like a next level of approachability, honestly. Like, I feel bad for the people who've been doing it for 30 years, and like your resources were super limited back then, compared to now.
My main resource, like there's tons of websites and forums and stuff like that for brewing information and talking to people and stuff. My main one that I frequent is the homebrewing subreddit, but they're nearing a 100 million. I'm sorry, 1 million like subscribers just to like the homebrewing subreddit right now. Like it's a lot of people. I think I heard a statistic some odd years ago, and I think it was just for men in America, but something like 1 out of every 6 American men have or are like currently homebrewers or have like homebrewed at some point in time in their lives. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
We got a question from Brandon. So what was your goal when you first started homebrewing, and what's your goal now? brewing goal? Jump on that. Brian, what's your goal? Why did you get into it?
Man, so when I first got into it, it was because I was poor as shit, and I really liked beer, and I thought that it would be a good way to save money because making 5 gallons of beer for the same price as a couple 6-packs, is it would be a good investment.
How's that worked out for you?
I have 3 freezers and 2 refrigerators in my basement with like thousands of dollars in other equipment, like consistently spending like hundreds of dollars a month on ingredients, giving away 2/3 of all the beer that I make.
Yeah, the biggest lie I was told when I got into that this was cheap. My first per bottle price was like $10 a bottle. So.
After the initial investment, it will get there, but then there's always something new. My next investment is going to be electric brewing, and probably just not an all-in-one system. So who even knows there? But there's always something else. There's always special bottles that you want, and you start wanting to get into like brewing, mixed fermentation sour beers. But you don't want to use just the stuff that you can find, from yeast suppliers. So you find nice bottles of sour to harvest the dregs. Then you need the equipment to make sours for the dregs that aren't going to contaminate your other equipment. So you buy separate equipment for that. But then you're going to bottle your sour beer, and you don't want to cross-contaminate, for your normal equipment. So you buy equipment just for your sour beer. It just goes on and on and on and on.
So Drew, this one, right? This question might be better for you since you're out of the 5 of us. You're the one going pro. So I guess what was your goal when you started, and why pro? Why now?
Cool points. Does that work for why I started in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Who wouldn't want to be like the guy in Untapped, getting like the 5 stars or whatever, being like, this beer like kicks ass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
and like, I mean, if you told me your hobby was basket weaving or something, I'd be like, that's cool. Like, I'm glad that gets you going, But it's like brewing beer, man. Like, everybody can enjoy and share in that. It's just one of those things. And then, obviously now, I love it so much. I want to do it for a living. So that's where my head's at. That's where I'm headed. I've always wanted to run my own business someday. So working on getting Doster Brewing Co. up and running and doing this thing full time. So
right on.
Yep.
So then for the homebrewers, Doug or Bill, why do you guys keep doing it?
I'll let Doug go first. I cut him off last time.
Yeah, I started it because I needed a hobby. I used to work a lot, just didn't really have any hobbies, and it was really fun when I started. And 4.5 years into it, I kind of was the same. I was like, man, maybe I want to do. Actually, into the halfway through the first brew, I'm like, I'm opening my own brewery. This is going to be great. And yeah, no, I don't want to do that now. It's where it's going. Just making good beer. I make a lot of beer for friends. I kind of been getting guys to set up kegerators. I'm like, hey, go buy these ingredients, and I make their beer for them. It's just fun. It's just a great hobby. I mean, I'm kind of the same. I give away way more than I drink. It's just fun. The whole going pro thing, to me, I was more afraid I wouldn't like it anymore. If my livelihood depended on it, I was more concerned that this thing can be fun anymore. And I really enjoy this. I kind of want to keep it. I did a little internship at the brewery. It was fun. Then I just kind of, seeing that, I was kind of like, nah, I want to keep this as a hobby.
What about you, Bill?
Yeah, I was a big craft beer nerd for a real long time, and not many of my friends were, so I was getting to the point where I go to like Mega Bev, and I think it was hard to find something that I hadn't tried. I do not have that problem now. Like, I bet I haven't had 20% of what's on the shelves these days, but after a while, you're kind of like, I want to make something. I want to create something. And I like you, I like to cook and I like science. I was a chemistry major, biochemistry major, actually. So, I mean, to me, it just kind of fit into a hobby that I needed something like that. I wanted something like that. But yeah, now, I mean, I'm not going pro. I think everybody's had that same dream, though. Every home brewer, like at least once or twice, somebody tells you, "Oh, you should make this, you should sell it," and you go, "Well, maybe I could now." I was like, "No, everybody I talk to that does that, they wind up, doing. You'll find out, Drew, I'm sure, but like way more not doing stuff than brewing stuff once they get going, and that's not what I want."
Yeah, I'm probably going to be dipping more into my business entrepreneurial side and less of my brewing side.
Right. See, I think that's why
take off. So
I think that's the benefit for you, though, Drew. Is you wanted to own your own business, and that's what that was your dream. And I agree with Doug. I never wanted to own my own business, so I don't want to ruin my hobby by making it my job. But totally, you have that other side, so you get to do two dreams. That's cool.
I'm all management, business major. That's what I've always been into. So working for myself, why not make beer? Sounds like fun to me. So
exactly. I think that's why I got started in it. And for me, to answer Brandon's question, it sounded fun. I was starting to hang out at microbreweries or craft breweries and started getting to know Trevor and talk to people about it. And I like cooking and it sounded neat. I'm like, well, hell, I can try that. And I'll try a lot of hobbies. I probably try way too many hobbies. But now I guess what keeps me going, I've definitely stepped down. Like I've had the years where I brewed 60 batches of beer in a year. Wow. I got a year like this year where I
not 65-gallon batches because that's illegal.
There's multiple adults in his house. It's
fine. Oh, okay. All right.
Right. Where I had a batch of brew, at least a batch of beer going every week.
Wow.
And then some weekends where I was brewing 2 or 3. And screw you. It makes up for it.
Everyone cares.
Then I've got this year, I think I brewed like 4, or whatever. But it was my obsession for a while, and now although I know a lot more now, and I can. Back then, I was sitting there going, I wonder what rose hips, oranges, and peppercorns would be like in a pale ale. And now I'm like, yeah, it wasn't that good.
Yep.
But
but I know
you can't find that shit on the shelves or anything like that. So
it pushes the craft forward. You got to have a few mistakes along the way. I mean,
right. And then now, what keeps me going is the same thing. I say to the club all the damn time. I did not get enough participation trophies when I was a kid, and I love doing for competitions.
I think we had that conversation before. I was the same way. My first ever medal that I got for anything that wasn't a participation trophy was 3 years ago when I got a medal for brewing a beer. Yeah. And like all of a sudden you're like, it's like a fucking rush. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, I'm good at something.
I brewed that first IPA, my very first beer. Trevor convinced me to submit it to Siciliano's. I got a medal. I know now that, any beer that scores over 30 points or 32 points at Siciliano's gets a medal. I know that hundreds of people got a medal in that competition, but it didn't matter at the time.
Absolutely.
I got a medal. I took it down to Trevor. Look at what I got. He hung it around my neck in the brewery, made me wear it around the brewery, and people bought me beer. And
Trevor.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And it was like crack. I need that. So now that's primarily what I do. I'm thinking about recipes I can brew for various competitions, and this year to have no competitions totally fucking sucked. So
that's been a bummer.
Why don't you guys enter the Mazer Cup? Just saying.
I will next year. And all the mead that I had for the Mazer Cup this year was like $8 a bottle, and I just wasn't willing to give it up.
Fair.
I guess.
That's my problem with competitions. I'm so cheap, It's like by the time you like give away the beer and then you pay someone to ship it somewhere. You know, it's $18-$20 just to ship it, plus the entrance fees. It's like, man, that metal isn't worth that. I love the free ones, you know, or the local ones. The drop off ones I usually do. But.
It's worth 10 times that, Bill. What are you talking
Yeah, I
about?
mean, right. Some
Yeah, I
people,
just dump money down the drain and send some bottles in. It's okay.
I did just send I sent a couple beers to the Brewlosophy podcast, so we'll see if we'll.
Oh, nice.
nice.
How long ago?
That was more expensive than I thought it was going to be. That was like three and a half weeks ago. He said they're waiting to be sampled or whatever at the. So we'll see what Jersey and Tim have to say about me.
Where's he live? Is he in
Fresno.
America?
Fresno.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think they just got evacuated, or a lot of parts of Fresno.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll burn up in a fire. I don't know,
Yeah.
for his sake, but good God, that'd be even a bigger waste. To my
The few homebrew reviews I've heard them do have been pretty interesting. So
yeah, I just thought it'd be funny. You know, I listened.
I'd love to do it too. I
actually just kind of wanted to hear what they'd say. And
you're my fucking hero for doing it, man.
They do them in sessions, as I understand it, right? So like
$20, you know,
they'll do like 8 or 10 beers in a night or something.
Yeah. We'll see.
No, that's awesome. What about you, Brian? Did you talk about it? About you do it and what you're doing it for?
Yeah, I did.
It
was to save money at first. Yeah, now it's a little bit of like, I don't know. I want to say partially like notoriety. Like I'm never gonna like open up my own homebrew club or anything like that. But at the same time, like I like being a person that people come to with like questions and stuff like that. And not even like if it can't even be like locally or something like that, like I participate, on the homebrewing subreddit a lot. I write articles for the website a lot. I just try to like put information out there, and I've got people finding old posts that I've made on Reddit, like sending me messages like every couple of weeks about like a rye wines or I made one about brewing it's like the smoothie style sour beers when those were first like starting to get popular and stuff like that. But really now it's not so much even brewing in general as it is like the home brewing community for me. I want to be somebody that can like help the home brewing community grow. So one of my goals sometime maybe in the next like 10 years or so is to run for an AHA like board spot.
Nice.
So we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's like you have all said, it's just a fucking great hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's not even about the beer necessarily. It's more about the community of people that are making the beer for me. Like everybody is just so cool. Like I can't think of a single like homebrewer that's like a total asshole. Like
I think it's why we do what we're doing now, even this show and stuff. It was to be more engaged with the brewing community in Michigan. It's such a great group of people. That said, we should do I know our viewers are still pretty low, but we should try to do a monthly or bi-monthly homebrew where all we do is try people's shit and talk about it. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, Mike Lightfoot gave us a couple beers, a couple months ago. Yeah, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I'd love to drink more people's beer on air. One, just to get more free beer. So that would be awesome. Let's do that. We'll both down. Right on.
Well, so the show's going on a little bit long, but like one last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about that I thought was kind of interesting, or maybe some of like when we first start homebrewing, a lot of what we learn is by like hearsay and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like homebrew myths that we all hear. Oh gosh, I wrote something down here earlier when I was thinking about like topics to talk about. Something that none of us really do anymore, like secondary fermentations, right? So a lot of kits that you buy today, and I haven't brewed like a kit in a while, but I see people posting kit questions all the time, and a lot of these kits suggest that after fermentation is done, still to transfer to another bucket to get off of the yeast, and then later again to transfer to a bottling bucket to actually do the bottling, which, as we know, as like more experienced homebrewers, that adds a lot of oxygen to the fermented beer, and will add sherry and cardboard flavors and stuff that we don't really want, and we don't do that anymore. But like, I guess a lot of these kits still do that apparently, and this is just like a speculation sort of thing, but they do it as a way to sell more equipment. Because
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So you need another bucket.
Yep.
You need a racking cane.
Yep.
And there's probably other few things
You need
too.
a stainless steel racking cane.
Yeah.
That's $100
Brew SSS siphon. Yeah. But part of it's probably just like outdated generic information that they send with every recipe or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, there's got to be, especially in the olden days, like,
I don't know if it's just a beer kit thing though, because I'm looking back on it. I've never used a beer kit. I've always brewed all grain individual, by buying the individual ingredients. But I want to say for the first 2 to 3 years of brewing, I racked every goddamn beer on this.
Sure.
I had secondary or even tertiary on every
Most of mine I did
single
too.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point I was just like, why the hell am I doing this? And I can't say that I've gone into secondary on anything. Hell, even my fruit beers now, I'm just adding fruit to the primary.
Yep.
And letting it go.
But
So
don't you think the ability to cold crash or keg makes a huge difference there too, though? I mean, like, if clarity is your main goal with going to a secondary, like, I mean, when I started out, I had no way to cold crash. I was bottling everything. I mean, what do you guys think?
No, I think cold crashing definitely helped, but I'm struggling. I'm trying to be like, well, I've always cold crashed, but then again, I started brewing in January.
Yeah,
I literally did cold crash. Just I used to, for the first 3 or 4 months of my brewing, I cold crashed in my garage, and then I got a temp controller and a keezer pretty quick. So yeah, having the ability to cold crash definitely does reduce the need to probably reduces the need for people to go to secondary for clarity.
Yeah, let's say you live in Texas, Jason. What do you do then?
You get a $39 Inkbird and a used freezer off Craigslist.
All
man.
right, yeah. There
So
you go.
I think you just deal with having sediment at the bottom of the bottle, and it's fine.
That's right too.
That stuff's gonna crash out.
Right.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, even in competitions, they don't really judge that. That might be like a point. If that one, they don't even see the bottle. So
and the visual aspect is only worth 3 points. Right. So
yeah, total. Right.
Total.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. You might lose a point if your beer has some sediment or some floaties. It's homebrew. Drink it.
Yeah. And well, man, speaking of that, like, so many breweries are putting out beer these days that are like, drink right from the can, like, the Alchemist.
Heady Topper says it right on the top of the can.
Yeah. And part of that was that they didn't want people judging their beer's haziness and having it, be a off-putting thing. I think,
Heady Topper has fucking hop leaves floating in it, man.
Oh, dude. I mean, most of the big, like, New Englands do these days. All of Old Nation stuff do. Hot Butcher, I get some of that stuff. The stuff that I have from Ferndale Project has some. Like, it's just like a thing now, for better or for worse. But you sort of have to homebrew poor commercial beers now. Sometimes, and maybe it's just becoming a thing.
Doesn't Old Nation have a thing on the side that says to roll the can just to get all the sediment off and kind of mix?
Yeah, they say you can do either or. Yeah, you can roll it, mix it in, or you can do a slow pour.
Yeah.
But they're also kind of embracing the haze too, which has gotten, from when Heady Topper came out as I guess ultimately the first New England. When New England's and the haze craze wasn't a thing, they were, they didn't want people bitching about this hazy, funky, cloudy, chunky beer. And so it said, drink straight from the can. But now I think it's kind of gotten accepted more, and so you got Old Nation, and it's like, yeah, roll it, stir it up, mix it up, pour it out. It's part of it.
Pour it like a Heffy or something.
Right. So what other myths? Does anybody else have anything else like that?
I don't usually like rehydrate dry yeast much anymore. I mean, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference from what I've read, and I've done it, and it doesn't seem to matter. Sometimes I'll sprinkle it in. Even the Lalaman guy that I think he was on, something he just said it might kick off a little faster, but looks like the endpoint's always about the same. So I don't think that's a necessary step, even though the package, every new homebrewer will get that and do it because it says it on the package to do it.
It's true. I mean, a lot of homebrewers talk about like that going to the next level is kind of doing the yeast starter, and I know Brian likes them. And
yeah,
but yeah, with dry, you don't really have to.
And even for dry yeast, they recommend not doing the yeast starter. It has all like the oxygen and nutrient requirements like needed, like baked into like the powder, essentially. So yeah, I've never rehydrated a dry yeast for my beers. I do for my meads and wines with some extra nutrient. So that's probably like a one-off there, but
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do like a.
Oh, go ahead.
I used to like a vitality starter sometimes, just kind of like a quick little bit of wort in there and let it sit while I'm brewing for the day. I didn't do the whole stir plate things, kind of let it get going a little bit. I did an Imperial Stout. Go ahead. What?
No, you're doing like a bloom. You're just letting it kind of hydrate and bloom.
Yeah, just kind of hydrate a little bit, and there's a little sugar in there. Like I'll just mix a little DMA or one of those prop starters. I did do a starter with K97 last year because I just wanted to see how it would do. I did an Imperial Stout with it, believe it or not.
Really?
It was like starting gravity was 1.113, and it fermented down to like 1020, 1025. It was like 3 packs, and the tolerance on it was 10%. I think I hit 10%.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just wanted to try it. Good work. I actually still have about a quarter keg left sitting on my kegerator right now. I just put it back on gas.
Yeah, I can't think of any other myths specifically for me that I was. I
The only
got
other
a lot of shit off of you, like my CO2 condoms with on my New England.
Well, yeah. Speaking of CO2, I mean that's the only other one that I can think of like right offhand is that I see a lot. I won't say a lot, but a couple times a year I'll see somebody make a comment with a suggestion of like if they like if somebody, I don't know, maybe like dry hops their beer or something like that, to just spray a little bit of CO2 inside and close the lid, because the CO2 will form a layer over the beer because CO2 is heavier than air, right? Like the whole CO2 layer thing, and the oxygen can't get through it. But that's not a thing, right? Like, so gas expands to fill the containers that they're in, as we learned in like elementary school or whatever. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's so much energy with like the molecules bouncing around and shit like that like even though CO2 is heavier than air, like those like CO2 molecules are going to be fucking bouncing all over the place because they're being hit by all the other molecules that are bouncing all over the place. So there's no layer. If you were to like take a jar of CO2 and like tip it over, like it would, if you could see it, probably like sort of like for a little bit like form a layer. People like to point out that that event that happened, and I think it was someplace in either Africa or South America, where like the CO2 eruption happened in that lake.
Yep.
and covered up this little village and like killed like almost everybody. They're like, well, if CO2 wasn't heavier than air, it couldn't form a layer, then those people wouldn't have died. But like the thing is, like it does at first, because it's it just hasn't had the chance to expand outward and stuff like that. So I don't know. You're giving me a look, Jason.
You're kind of going against purging a little bit, and I believe in purging, but I also
no. Yeah.
I'm trying to relate it to,
Well,
when you purge a vessel, you're not just putting a little bit in, you're filling the
displacing.
vessel.
Yeah.
you're filling it up and you're removing
And then you're also
a
refilling
concentration
it,
of air and oxygen,
Yeah.
air basically. But
and you're filling it quickly.
you're
Like,
increasing the amount of CO2 percentage every
Right.
time. So
Yep.
you're going to be reducing the oxygen when you purge.
Yeah. I don't.
Just
I
there's a little CO2 buffer in there.
exactly.
I think I was surprised, but I read that and was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't ever imagine that I'm like pouring a layer of CO2 over. No, I feel like I have to. And in fact, the first time I ever participated in a professional bottling, I went to a brewery and I helped them bottle, and we were using beer guns, which you can squirt CO2 and then you pull the trigger and fill with beer. And I remember probably thinking like that, like I just need a little layer. So I was going like, and then filling with beer. And the brewer came over and he's like, no, you like lay on it, like shh. I'm like, well, that's way more CO2 than is filling that vessel. But again, because you're displacing all of the air, you're not laying the blanket of CO2.
And then having the layer of CO2 go like this as the beer, raises it up or whatever. Yeah.
You're displacing the air with CO2, and then you're displacing the CO2 with liquid.
I try to purge a lot of my stuff with CO2 for sure. I did once carbonate Matt McQuillan's wort. So So Matt McQuillan won the 2018 Bell's Homebrew competition. The 2017 competition, I pretty much completely fucked his chance because I tried to. I got his wort in a keg basically, and I tried to fill it with CO2 and purge it and stuff like that. But I kept it under pressure, a little bit of CO2 pressure to keep the seal on the keg sealed. And it just so happened that I kept it under enough pressure where I pressurized the wort before he started to use it for anything. And I had a very, very particular smell to it that carried through to the end beer. So I'm glad that Matt got redemption the next year. He probably would have won 2 years in a row. I say that, maybe it's my fault. But I love you, Matt.
Here's a good myth from Patrick: hot side oxygen.
And the fence is, I don't know, it's still out there. The people that believe in HSA really still believe in HSA. There's the low oxygen guys that brew some pretty amazing beers that totally think that HSA is a thing. Do you want to explain what HSA is? I'm sorry, Jason.
No, so hot side aeration or hot side oxygenation is it's when your wort is either at post boiling, pre-cooling. You don't want to disturb or aerate your wort. It can cause when the wort is hot. I'm probably going to fuck this up, but the aeration can dissolve, or the gases in the air can dissolve faster in that, and it can leave some off flavors in the wort before the yeast can get to work on it. And so that's why I mentioned earlier that you wanted to aerate or oxygenate your wort. You want to do that after you've cooled it down to at least below 80 degrees, I think is the point. Most people try to hit 70 degrees before they aerate oxygenate. There's yeast manufacturers like White Labs that will actually tell you, I might even say it on their packet. I don't know if it says it on the packet, but I've seen an interview with, is it Mike White? Where if your yeast is strong enough and healthy enough and you oxygenate properly, that your yeast will eat off any off flavors you get from HSA. And I've heard that a lot. I've personally, I don't really worry about HSA, but on the flip side, I also don't let my beer get sloshed around before I cool it. From the point that it finished boiling, the flame out, to the point that I'm pitching it, I'm not letting it get disturbed. So I understand that a lot of people worry about it and think about it. But I personally don't think it's a big deal, but I also don't do anything to know for sure, I guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty much 100% with you. I don't fight whether it's real or not. I 100% agree that the people that do whatever they can to, eliminate it, make amazing beers, but so do the people that don't do anything. So, yeah.
A related one I think of is like sanitizing stuff that's hot side equipment, which is one I see every so often. Like, where like really, I think you're just wasting your time. Like if it's all stuff that's going to get boiled anyway.
Yeah, I was big on that for a while, and what Drew's referring to is anything that's going to go into anything that happens to the wort basically before it goes into the boil pot, as long as it's not like dirt and
Yeah.
like
You clean it,
bones
but
and, like
don't bother sanitizing it, I guess.
yeah, because it's all going to get boiled and stuff like that. And I used to be super big into sanitizing all of my shit all brew day long. Every time anything, no matter what, when touched, like anything related to my beer, like it was sanitized beforehand and yada yada. And yeah,
I remember in that first beer I brewed, if I took my spoon and laid it on the counter, I got all paranoid. Even like I'm stirring my boiling wort, and I laid my spoon down. Then I got paranoid and I went and cleaned it and sanitized it. Before I put it back in. And I know now, like, what a fucking idiot. Like you said, you're putting it in boiling liquid. Like anything pre-flame out is sanitized. But yet at the same time, I still make that 5-gallon bucket of sandy water every time at the beginning of my brew.
I've dialed down to 2.5 now.
I do 5.
Yeah, 2.5.
I even laughed on it
And
last
a little
weekend.
spray bottle.
Oh, the spray bottle, you bet. But I laughed at it last weekend where it's like I set up my brew day is like I get all my shit set up. I make that bucket of sandy water that I put everything in, and then I start my brew, and I throw my chiller in there too. And I'm like, why am I stoking my chiller in sandy water for 45 minutes? I throw my chiller in my kettle at 15 minutes before flame out, so that thing is well done and cooked. It could be sitting in the damn ground, for all that really matters. But yet I still soak it for 45 minutes before.
Must not be copper then.
It is copper.
You put it in star sand?
Yeah.
Oh,
That eats away a copper.
Had that thing for 7 years, man.
I throw it in, with nice and boiling and sanitize it that way. I'm weird about using star sand on my copper.
That's funny. I know that it leaches it slightly, but I've had that same chiller for 7 years and 6.5 years, 7 years, and it's sat in a bucket of sandy water for at least 45 minutes to an hour on every brew it's ever done.
I probably worry about it too much.
That's probably like the quote that you can take away like from this entire episode is I probably worry about it too much. Yeah. The whole relax, don't worry, have a homebrew. Yeah.
I should have worn my other shirt that said mash boil chill. Just chill. Just like, yeah.
Mine just says ask me about G Suite.
What about G Suite? Tell me about it. I got like 2 or 3 of those shirts too. Every time I walk into a place with that thing on, some smart ass is like, "What about G Suite?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Just
it sucks, man.
It sucks, right?
I don't know. That's all I got, gents. That was the last of my questions.
For the greater good?
Yeah, my myth for you guys.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's like 25 years ago. That's how long my myth goes back. That was from high school when I said chemistry sucks. When am I ever going to use this? That's my learning experience there. Yeah,
absolutely. It still holds true for algebra, though. Fuck algebra. Man.
Well, see, I use algebra, but yeah.
No,
you're never going to have a calculator in your pocket.
No, it's in my phone.
But if you're in the desert,
yeah,
you got to solve for B to find water.
There's a meme out there that somebody said you're never going to have a calculator in the real world. Right. All right. Anybody else have anything?
Matt had a question for Bill. I don't know if he knows
Oh,
the
yeah.
answer, but
Yeah, where's that at? Any news? Any updates?
They pushed it all to 2021. So we're gonna brew it. I mean, if everything's hopefully in a better place, we'll probably brew it next summer, and then hopefully GABF will go next year. We'll be able to do the Pro-Am next year. So
Cool.
for those that don't know, Bill won the 2019 Bell's Homebrew competition, so he gets to brew his beer with Bell's and enter it into GABF and go to Colorado with them and stuff like that next year. Now, hopefully.
Yeah,
And
hopefully.
the world's back.
What beer was it?
It
What'd
was
you brew, Bill?
a coffee blonde, basically.
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice.
What was it, like 9% or something?
Yeah, it was. I think it was the one I brewed for them was like 8.5, and then when I rebrewed it, it got up to like 9 because it fermented out a little more with the other yeast. So, but yeah, no, they were both good. I mean, so
they were. Yeah.
Right on. Well,
Patrick
next.
had a good question too. Whether or not you guys stir while cooling.
Oh yeah.
I used to be kind of weird about that, but I pretty much do now. Like, I'll stir a spoon around it to get a like whirlpool effect going.
Yeah, I don't go to town on it, but I definitely do stir it. Try not to agitate it too much.
I move my chiller back and forth instead of like stirring around it. But
Yeah.
He's a plate chiller, so
oh yeah.
primarily.
Bill's fancy. He's we're back to basics right now. We'll advance you. We'll invite you back when we do a up to advanced.
Pretentious brewing.
Pretentious brewing. That'll be a great episode. I can't wait.
Good brewery name right there.
Right.
There you go. Yeah, you can keep that, Drew.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Gonna be a lot of skinny jeans and man buns.
Mm-hmm. You know it.
There won't be a show next week. It's the first Monday of the month. We may or may not have a homebrew meeting. But I think we're going to take a week off, and we'll be back on the 9th of November. The subject of that show will be announced here in the next week or so while we figure that out and finalize some things or pull something out of our ass. Ain't nobody paying us for this shit, man. This is all for fun. So that said, see everybody in a couple of weeks. Thanks for hanging out and having a beer with us. And cheers. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Doug, feel free to stick around.